Hi, I'm Chris LeBron. I'm the Director of Design and Construction for Zenolith Partners. This is The Rise, 72 units of affordable and supportive housing, primarily for formerly incarcerated women and families. The project was an RFP in response to the state's Vital Brooklyn initiative, and that was the state's initiative focused on eliminating or addressing social, economic, and health disparities in central Brooklyn. And this was a site that we competitively bid for and were awarded. Within the robust community facility, we'll have programming focused on education, empowerment, employment, literacy, financial literacy, you name it, support groups, etc., to serve the population and also qualifying residents in the neighborhood to lift them up and be able to restart their lives.
So the RFP was issued by the state of New York, and the requirement for this site was to provide housing and services for formerly incarcerated individuals. I think there were a couple things that made our project stand out. One was, first and foremost, was the design and the idea of having high levels of sustainability. So I think that was really special. That was working with Magnuson Architecture and Planning. I think our focus on women was a big selling point. Our firm is a woman-owned business, and working with our partners at Women's Prison Association and their focus on formerly incarcerated women or women touched by the criminal justice system. I think that was a big part of it. The other component that we were focusing on was health and wellness. So in addition to serving the workforce and housing requirements of our residents, we're also wanting to focus on physical health, mental health, being outdoors, working with their hands, fitness. We have an extensive fitness program that's going to be happening on the lower level with spin classes and personal training and hopefully yoga and other wellness practices. And then the third part was a heavy dose of community organizations being involved, focusing really on being responsive to the needs of this specific community. Brownsville, we know from statistics, has one of the highest rates of re-entry from the prison system back into the neighborhood, and so the need is especially acute in a site like this. In addition to Women's Prison Association, we're working with the Brownsville Partnership, Brownsville Think Tank Matters, working with other organizations that are local to the immediate Brownsville neighborhood, certainly Project Eats. And Linda is a rock star. She's just incredibly talented artist. She's a deeply committed professional. She's as earnest as anybody that I've ever met in the community service space. And on top of all of that, she's an absolute blast to work with. She has a can-do attitude, a great sense of humor, and she's just a pleasure to partner with.
With all due respect to males, it's really great to work with women. And so to work with a development company that's women is also fantastic. You can get so much done that is nonverbal and make it happen, I think, without all the bumps and starts and stops and all the things that kind of get in the way when men do it. So I love that. Absolutely, I love Zenolith. Project Eats has been operating since 2009, and in around 2015, we began partnering with developers. On this roof, we're going to be growing in a soil medium in beds, and we're going to be growing all forms of vegetables and even some fruit that can be grown in New York City. Our beds on roofs can range anywhere from 20 to 50 feet in length, and the width is about 12 inches. We were trying to figure out how much space is here. We haven't figured it out yet, so I can't tell you the exact number and how they're going to lay them out. But let me say that this size roof is going to grow a lot of food. We offer a range of programs to support residents being very much engaged in Project Eats, in the farming, and the other things that we do. So another program we have is called Prepared Eats, And that program is one where we are providing plant-based prepared meals for people because for the farm to be effective and successful, we need to support people consuming plant-based food. And oftentimes that's not available in the communities that we work in. And so we do that any number of ways, from having free breakfasts on Saturdays for residents that are plant-based breakfasts, and we also have community dinners. And what's really wonderful is when residents realize that plant-based food can be as tasty, if not tastier, than food that has, animal protein. There is also a workforce development program, because for us, success is when residents in the community are farming, and they're employed to do that, to farm and to manage the operations. I'm particularly also connected to this project because I was a single mom. I was a single mom with two babies, and I know how tough that is, and I know that the choices that we have to make are hard choices, and sometimes they don't turn out the way we want them. Having an opportunity to live in this building and to have support in pursuing opportunities and making choices that are choices that help people to thrive where they live is key to everything Project Eats is about. Like, we work in communities where food insecurity exists and all of the other social and economic factors that come with food insecurity. What's so important for all of us that live in buildings is how we're not connected to nature. We're not connected in day-to-day life with the organic. And that is essential to who we are. This roof has a view on all four sides. I mean, imagine that. We can see Manhattan, we can see the different parts of Brooklyn. That gives us a perspective that's actually calming, and one that's more realistic, that we don't get trapped in our own egos about what we can make, but we become sensitive to and hopefully caring of the earth that supports us.
Xenolith is a great group of folks to partner with. And part of the reason why we enjoy working with them so much is they very quickly start to wrap their arms around the community partners that they decide to work with. So in this particular case, there were a lot of community partners, but most of all was WPA, the Women's Prison Association, and Osborne, both of whom are nonprofit organizations that work with people affected by the justice system. And their enthusiasm for the work that these two groups did, and their real focus on what these two groups needed by way of space, by way of program, by way of a building, so that they could better fulfill their mission within the Brownsville community, was something that they introduced right away. And because of that comprehensive approach to the program, to not just what the building looks like, but what the building will do and what the building will mean to a community, I think was one of the things that made it really exciting to work with them on. We took a kind of a broader look at what resiliency means to a community. And the recidivism rate in Brownsville is one of the highest in the city, and one of the highest in the state, and one of the highest in the country. And the community there has been so negatively impacted by that. And one of the aspects of that, working with WPA and Osborne, is we realized that a lot of folks that have been incarcerated, that have families, that when given an opportunity to reconnect with those families and live with those families, that the recidivism rate is microscopic. When not giving an opportunity to do that, that recidivism rate is really, really high. So one of the resiliency aspects from a community aspect that we really wanted to focus on in this project was creating family-size units for folks affected by the justice system so that people would have an opportunity to reconnect with their families, to live with their kids, to hopefully start to turn that tide for that community and for that population.
We decided to go after NYSERDA's Buildings of Excellence grant, and that sort of tipped the scale to pushing this to passive house. So we were awarded the grant. We were also awarded a Blue Ribbon in Design, which is the top design award for the award winners, and that grant enabled us to push the building from all electric and highly sustainable to passive house certified, and so that's what we're going for here.
She worked with the team at MAP on applying for the Buildings of Excellence program, and that funding that we were going for was $1 million, and that was going to be the difference between having just an all-electric building and having a building that could be passive house, that would meet those design standards and be eligible for certification. And when that money came in, we were able to pivot on some of the aspects of design. It's incredibly complicated, but the changes were feasible. And so that money made the difference for us being able to make that leap all the way to passive house.
We recognize the health benefits of passive house. And of course, that's a major focus when you're working with trauma-informed design, is the health of the residents. It's also the sound control, the quietness, the serenity of the interiors. I think affordable housing has always been kind of on the forefront of healthier housing, and passive house just makes sense to add to that.
Trauma-informed design, we think, is really important for this particular project, but we think it's also important to a lot of the work that we do across the boards. Housing insecurity is a trauma. A lot of the folks that are in special needs populations or other populations that are typically served by supportive housing have experienced a significant amount of trauma, and certainly folks that are coming out of the justice system. It is something that was a different way of approaching, of thinking about design that was very resident focused, recognizing the need for choice, recognizing the need for things like pleasing colors and natural light and opportunities for socialization and things like that have all been kind of folded into the Rise in a way that doesn't feel forced, doesn't feel kind of ham-fisted, but it feels like it strikes a balance where we hope that folks that live there enjoy the space, will feel good about living there, but won't necessarily come across something and go, oh yeah, that's trauma-informed design.
65% of the units are for formerly incarcerated women. So knowing that, we wanted to kind of not make this feel like an institutional building or make it feel like in any way that they're in jail. So if you think about jail, you're kind of confined. You might have like a sliver of a small thing, a window to look out and see nature very far away, but you're really restricted from a lot of those things. So and trying to bring it into the design, it's kind of doing the opposite of that. So we're trying to connect them to nature as much as possible. Obviously we're in the middle of Brooklyn, so there's not a lot of nature around us. So we're trying to kind of bring nature into the building to give them that feature by having these green roofs. We have vertical vine walls along East New York, and try to bring as much green space into the building as we can. Another feature as well is really large windows in all the units and the living rooms and the bedrooms. Really create a connection between inside and outside for them and make them not feel like they're in a really confined space. So I think those are really two of the kind of prominent features of trauma-informed design that you'll see throughout the project. I think that there are features of trauma-informed design and passive house that very much reinforce one another, and then there's features that actually kind of conflict. So I think that's been one of the challenges of the project, is trying to kind of solve our goals, achieve passive house while factoring in trauma-informed design. So for instance, with passive house, typically you want to really minimize going envelope to minimize the form factor, which is like the surface area to volume ratio of the building. But one of the trauma-informed design goals was to have these terraces and kind of have this stepping roofs. So we have 6 roofs in the building. So our form factor is a lot higher than you would probably want on a typical passive house building, but it was one of the main design concepts for trauma-informed design. So we worked with our passive house consultant, really early on to kind of mitigate that in other ways by having more robust insulation on the exterior walls, on the roofs, owning it on the airtightness, the thermal performance of the windows. So, we've, again, it's been more of a challenge, but, I found ways to kind of make sure that we're achieving all of our project goals when trauma-informed design and passive house might not necessarily align. The primary features of the building and why we call it the Rise is we had the step terraces out in East New York, so the 5th, 6th, and 7th floor, and then the main roof are all green roofs, occupiable for the tenants that serve as kind of planted spaces for the tenants to go out and socialize, spend their time, and kind of connect that back to nature. In terms of occupant resiliency, having passive house envelope that we do, having a really robust thermal envelope, heavily insulated walls, high thermal performance on the windows. If there is a power outage, the heat that the building has retained will, stay within the building for a much longer period of time than, a normal building. So in the event that the power does go out, for a few days or a week, the interior space should stay, comfortable enough just because of that robust thermal envelope that, the building occupants and users will remain comfortable and not have to rely on means of air conditioning to keep them comfortable. So that's one of the main features. That we don't have a generator in the building. It is completely, we really wanted to see an all-electric building. So we don't have the reliance on the generator if power does go out. We do have the solar PV array, which will help provide some means of power as well as the grid from the electrical grid from Con Edison.
Most passive projects kind of hit a lot of the same barriers, right? So the window assembly details, actually, speaking of, that we're standing in front of, that's probably the biggest one, right? There's a lot of thermal bridge calculation associated with the windows. So that's always a really important piece. In this specific project, due to the wall assemblies, there's not an opportunity to necessarily slide the windows out into the insulation plane so much. And so you can actually see, this is a good example, we've got this Hanoband tape between the windows here. And so that not only helps take place of what would be just traditional backer rod and sealant, this is a higher performing product. It fills the entire gap of the window frame, both like interior to exterior, and then as you can see the width here between the window and the rough opening provides a little bit more R value, and all of that is kind of twofold, helps with air sealing, and it also helps reduce thermal bridging. But that's one of the other notable items that we've recently worked through. Another key feature is you can see that this is a brick wall, right? So we've got relieving angle for the brick shelf, and there's no way to get around it. This all has to be attached to the building somehow. So we're using these thermal brake pads behind all the bracketry. So you see those everywhere. There's a bracket going through into the wall. This is all something that would typically maybe not make it through if this was not a passive house project. It would maybe get value engineered out, but in this case, pretty critical to, again, mitigate energy transfer on a really cold or hot day between interior and exterior.
Building a passive house, building and achieving certification is a challenge. We're running into challenges every step of the way and seemingly every day. But in the end, we think it's a worthwhile endeavor, and it is doable. And even a project like this, which has I would say, complicated design. It's not just a box. We have terraces, we have challenges here for a passive house and for the envelope and thermal bridges, etc. And as challenging as it is, in the end, it's going to be a super healthy, super sustainable building, and that's what we want to be building. And it should be a goal in the industry.
The team is operating at a very high level at this point. We're a year into construction, and it's a team that hasn't worked together before. And that combination of developer, owner, architect, local groups. And I think when everybody has a good attitude, that you have a better experience, and the building just comes out better. So we're pleased to be part of the team, and hope to be setting a great example for other projects like it.
States that don't have a public benefit corporation like NYSERDA to continue to improve energy efficiency think it's a small investment for a large reward.
Yeah.
To keep us, that public-private partnership really has a really good feedback loop and raises us all to the next level more quickly than we could do alone. The benefits of, having really efficient buildings, if states are worried about their grid and grid resiliency, this is a really cost-effective tool to help address that issue. And that's a concern for all states that we hear all the time. So it's a proven and has so many co-benefits that pay for themselves in other ways. So we're really feel very fortunate to be, helping move the Passive House, the science of it and the understanding of it forward quickly.
For some of you, it might just be another building and another topping off ceremony, but for 72 families, this is really going to be a beautiful new home base at which to rebuild their lives. The Rise is a special project. It's really going to have a positive impact on the future residents, the community, and the city of New York. So thank you. This is beautiful work, and I hope you're as proud as we are of this moment and of this building.